Yes.
And we're live with Warsman, one of the best custom figure makers in the business,
In the world?
in the world.
Guys.
So what is your forte? Is it LJNs? Is it Hasbro? Is it anything?
I cut my teeth back in 1994, starting on Hasbro's. And I worked on those all the way through 2000, 2001 when Jax switched over to kind of the ruthless aggression style body. I started working with those, and then a couple of years later, they went pretty hardcore with Legends, which is right up my alley, with the 80s stuff. So today I'm just working mostly in Mattel's, but I try to help out in a little bit.
Is that loud? Sorry.
That's right.
I help people who do LJNs and Hasbro's and Mattel and even Jax still. So I dabble in a little bit of everything.
So you must have a massive collection even before your own work, correct?
I'd say it's pretty modest, especially compared to what we see online.
Okay.
Hardcore collectors. I tend to just stick with Mattel from the era that I grew up loving, kind of that 85, 86, 87. Those are the only ones that I really want for my collection. So nothing past 92, that's for sure.
Now, are you having trouble right now finding figures to customize? Like the marketplace is out of control right now.
I've been pretty lucky. eBay's been pretty kind to me, and the friends and people I've met online are willing to do some wheeling and dealing to get the 3D printed heads that we make for some custom fodder bodies, I guess.
Yep.
So I think maybe we should back up a little bit too, because we're going right into this. I would imagine the audience probably doesn't even know what we're talking about. Some of them. So 3D heads and even the idea of customization. So, I mean, basically, can you tell us about the hobby? Could you introduce the hobby to a newbie that doesn't really know? They understand customize, but I would imagine that there are people watching this right now because this is a site. Our group is very book oriented. We have a lot of people that are into the wrestling books. And one of the things that got me into writing the books myself was that I wanted to customize books. I wanted a book to exist that didn't exist. And I would gather that customization, there's some kind of, common ground to that idea. There would be, figures that don't exist. And maybe you would want to make a figure that never came out that you wanted as a kid. But if you see crappy customizes out there, some people probably laugh off the idea of the whole hobby. But yours is so meticulous. And so, I mean, I would say that he has custom figures that look better than you would even see, on the shelves at Walmart sometimes because the detail and the attention to find, that he puts into his work. So can you tell us about the hobby and what it means to you?
Absolutely.
So maybe people will get it a little bit better what we're talking about here.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Back when I started, Hasbro, I think they stopped producing figures in 93. And by 94, with no new WWF figures to buy, but new characters coming out every other month, I needed a Diesel, and they never made a Diesel. So, I started taking apart Hasbro WWF figures to create my own Diesel. And, it takes a little bit of sculpting and painting along the way. And luckily back then there was a toy magazine that would feature custom figures. Maybe every quarter they would show off a few custom figures, mostly like Mego style, the old 70s figures with the real clothing. Spider-Man.
Can you give the audience an example of what Mego looked like? I think you just started to, so sorry about that.
Yeah. The Batman and Spider-Man and the Dukes of Hazzard had Mego figures with real clothing, kind of like smaller 8-inch Barbie dolls.
So you could take off Spider-Man's costume and he'd be in his like little red underwear, kind of like.
Yeah, I had Spider-Man underoos on.
Not that I did that, but Ed would do that from time.
So that, just the creativity of seeing other people customize those figures really sparked it for me with wrestling, since wrestling was kind of my passion. So I started it in the Hasbro days and never really stopped up until Jack stepped it up and started making some. So I thought, I should start working in the Jack's line. And then along the way,
so is Jack's easier to customize than Hasbro?
In a
Hasbro's
way,
hard plastic, right? And Jack's you can boil and do different stuff with.
Those are very sturdy, very hard plastic that it's really difficult to do any part swapping, at least not easily without major disassembly. With Jack's, you can boil and pop the softer plastic onto other parts. But somewhere along the way, kind of in the early 2000s, I learned how to shrink and enlarge heads. So I could take, and I did take, some of the old LJN, big bodies and shrink those heads down to the Jack's size. Outback Jack, Slick, a couple, just the people that they were never going to make.
How do you do this? Or do you want to not tell because it's a trade secret?
I cannot stand people who clutch onto their. I share everything. There's stuff called alginate that I think originally dentists use it to make a mold of a mouth, and then they enlarge it in water. So anyways, you make a mold of a head using silicone rubber. You put in this stuff called hydrospan or hydro shrink, depending on what you want it to do. And you make a casting of it, and then you either leave it out to air dry and shrink, or you soak it in water to enlarge. And once you get it to the size you want, you make another mold of that. So in Japan, they sell real small, like 1.5 inch mini big heads, but the sculpts are really nice. So I would take those Japanese wrestler heads and enlarge them for Jack size. Or I would take the big LJN size heads and I would shrink those down for Jack size. And I did that for a very long time until the 3D printing, fad really kicked in, and I figured out a way to get that going.
So your first customs were basically, I don't want to use the wrong word, but like bootlegging other figures to make them adapt to different size bodies of the newer figures.
My first ones were just straight up part swapping and painting, but then, in the early 2000s, I would start kind of reproducing but then changing by resizing the heads, based on what I could find, what was being made.
Now, which ones do you think are the easiest? Do you think LJNs are the easiest, or do you think the Jacks are? Or the Hasbros
to work on?
Yeah.
Definitely, I think Mattel, especially current Mattels, that's the stuff being sold in stores right now.
Really? Interesting.
Over time, they've gotten a lot better at, I don't know if they just use less glue or something. If you wanted to crack open that torso and do a lot of part swapping and changes, it's just gotten a lot easier over time. Or maybe I'm just more used to it. It's pretty easy to boil them and pop it open and change the parts around.
So when somebody boils them, okay, what do? Do they take a clamp, they put the figure in the hot water, then it makes it so it's more malleable, like clay, and then you can pull it apart without damaging it? Is that the idea? I'm just trying to simplify the little bit I know and let the audience know what you do with some of
plastics that they use for these figures. One is like super hard, which would be the body and like the hip area, but then there's a softer plastic that they use for the arms and the shoulders and the heads and the legs. That softer plastic that's a little more bendy, I'm trying to figure out,
okay.
when that warms up, you could just pop that right off. So yeah, you'd leave it in just boiled water for 30 seconds to a minute, pull it out. You can pop his arms off, his head off, his legs off, and everything else. And it also warms up this hard plastic enough that you can kind of stick a screwdriver in a couple places and pop it open, and then you're good to go.
Here's an example of one that I have, which is one of my favorite ones.
Is that a disciple?
Yeah, it's a disciple. It's a Brutus
awesome.
beefsteak with a Macho Man head.
I won't judge.
Did he
You
make
don't like
it?
that, you don't like that one?
No, it's a great custom, but the disciple? Come on.
Ah, all right. Well, what I think is cool about the LJNs is that there were so many. At least I only collect the LJNs, but I do think it's cool because I think about all the guys. I'm like, oh, I wish they would have made that one. Like, I wish they would have made that. I wish they would have made that guy.
Yeah, that definitely started it for me. I never had a big LJN collection. My parents kind of figured I was growing out of it around them, but I still wanted them. But they never made Smash.
Right.
The Barbarian. So you kind of have half of a tag team.
Yeah.
That kind of started it, like planting the seed of wanting to make more of my own for myself. But yeah, I've done a lot of LJN size 3D printed heads. I don't have any beside me right now, but that's really taken off. The LJN collecting community is still going on.
Right.
They're still making customs right and left that are awesome, and a lot of people have started using the 3D printed heads that we produce.
Now, I've always been curious, like, why can't somebody recreate this and be able to produce 5,000 of them with
The same
3D
thing.
Yeah, like, how hard would it be, especially with the technology today?
I mean, I guess it would be bootleg to sell them, and that might be why Warsman does not sell
finished. Don't sell anything finished. I try to stay away from naming.
That's what I'm trying to think of now. I've been to his site, and he has these 3D heads for sale, and he doesn't. It's not Jim Cornette. It's like the angry drive-through guy or whatever. Like he gives it a funny name that you would have to figure out who it is, and then you're like, oh, I know who he means. And that way, he's not really, any sort of intellectual property. It could be anybody, but it just so happens to look a little bit like Bruiser Brody, or what have you. So, I think we might. There we go.
That Brody head. Brody head has hair, and he's African American. He's not painted. He's not painted up, so you can't tell that.
Yeah. You get it, Ed?
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know what. I've tried to buy the LJN trademark. I've tried a couple of times. And because I've been thinking, I'm like, I don't know why they couldn't bring that line back for the current guys that are out there now, because I've always felt it's the best one.
Last I heard, the guy that started and owns Jack's Pacific was the LJN guy. Like he's the same guy, and he's still alive, and he still holds those trademarks.
And he did a little run of them for a bit, right at the tail end.
Well, the LJN trademark was bought by somebody in a Facebook group.
That's what I heard.
Huh.
Yeah.
Also, the name.
The name and the logo was purchased by somebody else.
But the molds probably belong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All that. Yeah. Right. All that stuff is still owned by. I think it was Grand Toys that bought LJN, and then they merged with somebody else, bought them out eventually. But yeah, the LJN when it expired. But I've always thought, because you saw the Young Bucks when they did the LJN thing, which I thought was going to catch on with AEW. I'm kind of surprised that it didn't.
Yeah, my opinion is they just don't understand how nostalgic people are for those LJNs and how wanted the LJN style.
They would probably grow their audience by a significant margin as well, because you get people like me. They're like, oh, you know what? I'll start watching because I'm going to buy the figures, and I want to know who the people are that I'm watching.
Absolutely.
Now, have you ever tried working for a toy company or anything like that?
I have not. I'm a school teacher by day, Santa Claus by night, working on, the stuff that makes me happy.
Can you show us one of your better figures, just so we can see like one of the heads? I want people to see the actual detail that we're talking about here. Because I mean, if you go on eBay and you type in custom figure and you look on eBay and then you got like they just paint over Hulk Hogan's face and they say he's whatever,
Right.
and you can tell it's not. His art are so detailed that it's ridiculous.
Looking at what I have beside me, I've got a couple. This one I'm working on. You got to know Conrad Thompson.
Oh yeah,
It's the Conrad figure.
right.
Nice.
Him and his sidekick Dave Silva is another one that.
Oh well, somebody just asked the question. Do you get a lot of special requests from wrestlers?
Actual wrestlers.
A few, mostly just super fans of somebody who's never had one produced, like Sami Callihan. Some people who haven't made it to the WWE or may never make it there. It seems like mostly just super fans. I have, thanks to Dave, sent stuff to Tony Schiavone that he enjoys and has on his desk, or I sent a Dino Bravo to his daughter after the Dark Side of the Ring episode. And then Bruiser Brody's widow reached out to me, and I sent her a Bruiser Brody. So that's all really cool.
Could you rattle off some of the more detailed ones that you have in your collection, or ones that you've made that just people could hear about and be like, "Oh wow, I didn't know that he didn't exist"? Or
sure. Like I don't have a finished figure yet, but William the Refrigerator Perry.
That's awesome. Like even to think about doing a fridge figure is awesome.
So
is that Al Snow? Wait, what, Avatar?
But this is Hayabusa, Japanese.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it could very well be turned into that shinobi character that Al Snow.
Yeah.
William Perry, Dino Bravo, Butch Reed, WWF President Jack Tunney. We've made Gobbledygooker. I am working on an Uncle Elmer right now.
Oh, that's a great one.
Oh man, check that out. That is great.
I started him the other day. But like I said, the ones that just don't stand a chance of ever being made, those are the ones that are near and dear to my heart. SD Jones, the Conquistadors, Iron Mike Sharp, people, the unsung heroes of the 80s.
So when people purchase the heads, are you assuming that they're going to be using them for their own customs?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So there's a huge underground community of these custom guys that you probably are not familiar with. I've gone online and seen where they create whole backdrops with the ring and they set it up so it looks like an old world class, setup, with the Von Erichs, and they'll have a missing link figure. And
there's one guy that I've seen his work. It's unbelievable. I can't think of his name. He's known for like the Genius. He did the Genius one. It's like JD something. I think his name is RD. I don't know his actual name, but he made like the LJNs, but he does like the Genius, Earthquake.
Oh,
I mean, these are like, you're like, wow, I would think that would be in the store. Like they're better than the regular ones.
Yeah. So Warren, how do they do the bodies on those? Like, do they cast the whole body? Is that what they do?
You can do a good amount of part swapping just by cutting that old LJN rubber, inserting a metal rod kind of to connect them, and then resculpting in the gaps. I've seen a lot of that kind of part swapping on LJNs. But the level of creativity and artistry in custom making just blows me away, because, I've been at it since '94 when I was struggling to even paint a straight line. And now to see, you're right, the kind of stuff that people do from custom clothing. Like I've spent more on custom clothing for my action figures than I have for my own wardrobe. Arena play sets. Artistry, a lot of artistry there. Yes, the figures, definitely a lot goes into that. Just
so if people wanted custom clothing, what's available and where would they get it?
There's a couple places that I would recommend. The first is Ralph's Figure Clothing, and I believe it's based out of the Philippines.
And he died though, didn't he? Now I'm showing that I know a little bit about this.
Wow.
But go
his
ahead.
wife,
His
and
wife still does it. Okay.
still does it. Whoever else was helping him make it, they still crank out product, and I still buy it. I think it's great.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have a Big John Stud figure and you want a robe, you could go to this guy, this business, Ralph's, and they may have every robe that a particular guy may have worn that is familiar on tape.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
Not only that, but you can do a special request too. Like if they don't have it, they'll make it. They are really good. There is somebody I just found on Instagram, and I think she goes by X6 _ figure _ artist. Like she has made the most amazing wrestling figure clothing, entrance gear, whatever you want to call it. I mean, looking at it, you think you're looking at the real product, like our scale. Like she made a baseball cap for these 8-inch figures that looks out of real cloth and material that just blows me away. Like her artistry is amazing. And I just reached out to her. She's going to be making me a Sir Oliver Humperdinck multicolored WWF jacket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I want one of those. So correct me if I'm wrong. Then when you do these, you're looking for the perfect head, or you're creating the perfect head. You're looking for different body parts. So you might find a certain body of a guy, and maybe the arms aren't right or the hands not right. So you switch it. So it becomes a big Tetris game or a big scavenger hunt, right?
Yeah.
Do you have that kimchi like right nearby? Now I'm asking this because I played kimchi in the past for Kamala, and I saw a picture of it the other day, and I start looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so he's got a hat. I don't know where he got the hat. I don't know if he made it. He's got a head. I think he made the head, and then he ordered the jacket somewhere, and then he's got certain boots. So it seemed to me like you really get down to every detail, the hands, everything, in order to make it custom, to really customize it. And then that's what I think really sets his work and some of these really good customizers out from everybody else.
I don't great eye for detail in my regular life, but when it comes to wrestling figures and being detail oriented about those, I've got that bug. I've got that gene, I guess. Back when I was a young kid, right around when I turned 10 was when LJNs were coming out. My parents kind of thought I was too old for that kind of stuff, so I had to either hide my LJNs, but I started drawing little paper dolls of all the WWF wrestlers and their real attire. Like I would study their clothing based on what they wore on TV, or if I could get the magazine. So I was drawing their attire for probably 7 years. And if they updated something or changed it, I drew a new one, and I had their little moves on a card, and I made my own game out of it with dice and everything. So I was always detail oriented about their attires and facial expressions, or, hand gestures or whatever it might be. That's been with me luckily since 1986.
Do you ever look at something that one of these companies puts out and think to yourself, I could have done a better job than that?
Every once in a while, not often. I love the product that the companies are making. And I'm not too hard on them because I know, they've got 100 people in the pipeline, in the process to make everything. So it's hard to get everything 100% perfect because there's just so many hands on it. But I would say 90% of the time, the big companies do a really good job with it. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple stinkers that make it out that I just shake my head like, how did that get put out?
So where are the voids now, and maybe where are the voids in the past? Do you have your own line of Jack's Customs and also your own collection of the new Mattel, and what ones are missing, and what have you put in to fill those holes, or is that what you even do?
Yeah, every month we kind of run what I call a pledge, where I just see if I've got enough interested people to, if I did an AWA set, to see, I might throw out 20 or 30 names and see if I can get the right number of people who would be willing to pay to have a head sculpted. The old stuff, obviously, they're not going to do a Memphis set or an AWA, a lot of the AWA guys. So any of the old stuff with me is super popular. It's just finding other collectors who are into that really old stuff, the 70s and 80s.
So you say you do a poll. Why do you do a poll with them? Just so you can create the head and spend the time on it, and then other people throw in some money for heads? Or
as crafty as I am, I do not do the 3D sculpting. I've got a partner that does that, and he has to eat. His family has to eat. So I have to pay him to do, these awesome sculpts that he does, and I have no problem with that. So yeah, it does cost money to have him do the sculpts. So there's a certain amount we need to raise. So I just have to check and see if we have enough people who would be willing to help me meet that threshold to get it sculpted.
Oh, that's cool. So you're a head shrinker or a head grower, but you're not a head sculptor, but you're a head sculptor contractor.
And a printer.
Okay. And a printer.
Yeah. He does the sculpting. I do the printing and shipping and painting and, that kind of stuff.
Can you give some examples of some that he's done for you?
All of the 3D stuff. My partner's name's Tom Veg. If you
what's one of the wrestlers he's done ahead of? Or do you not want to say? Is there a reason maybe you're not saying the name?
Oh, like I said, every one, he sculpted them all. Uncle Elmer, the William the Refrigerator Perry.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mr. Hughes.
Mr. Hughes, all right.
So once he does one, you're able to reproduce it over and over again?
Yeah. What I'm buying from him is...
Was that Killer Khan?
What I'm buying is the digital file.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
Norman the Lunatic.
Oh, nice.
We just did a... I can't wrap my head around ZBrush well enough to do the sculpting that he does. He went to school for it. He's classically, he's educated in graphic design and that kind of stuff. So he's amazing.
So does he sculpt them on clay and then mold it? Or it's all digital? Oh, okay. Huh.
Now, what do people think when they come into your house for the first time and see all the heads lying around?
They realize I've got a real problem.
I had a early morning flight once, and I was working on trying to customize some figures, and I had an Iron Sheik head and 2 Roddy Piper heads in my jacket pocket, which I totally forgot about. So I'm getting patted down when you go through the airport security, and they go, "You gotta take those out." I'm like, so I emptied my pockets, and I just stared at the guy
heads. Sorry. You had heads in your pocket?
Yeah.
Why heads? Are you doing some?
I was trying to figure out how to put a head on a different figure. And I happened to have them in my pocket at 7:00 in the morning, and the guy just stared at me I'm like, I don't know why I have those.
That's why you just smile and shake your head. That's right.
That's great.
So what do you think? What do you think is the the future of the industry
or the hobby, or is it an industry?
I think it's an industry. I mean, I spent a lot of money in it, so I think it is.
Okay.
Mattel's rocking and rolling, and Wicked Cool Toys, or maybe it's Jazzwares now. I don't know for sure. With the AEW line, it looks like a lot of smaller companies are cranking out some luchador figures and Japanese figures, and even Andre the Giant is getting a couple figures from a smaller toy company. So I see it up big time. As far as customizing goes, I'm really trying to educate people on how easy it is and affordable now to get a 3D printer. And if you have a decent phone, scanning is possible. Just with an iPhone 10, anything beyond a 10, you can do a digital scan of yourself or a friend or whatever you want, and create a file from that and do some 3D printing and make yourself.
Ah,
How do you do that with your phone? Would you take pictures all around the head or something? And,
Yeah,
okay.
you would download an app, and like you said, you would take multiple pictures, and then the app would stitch those pictures together to make a 3D model. And then it would finish it up in the app and create a file that you could export and either continue to work on in another program or try to take straight to the printer and print it up.
wow.
What lines do you like personally, other than customizing? Like, what sets do you prefer? What was your favorite collection as far as not customizing, like what's out there or what's been out there? One of my more favorites, the sleeper one, was called Legends of Professional Wrestling, where they had an Abdullah. They had like a glow in the dark one.
Yep.
They made a bunch of guys that didn't exist, and they were sort of almost Hasbro size, maybe a little bigger, I think. Or actually, how big were they? Probably right in the middle, right?
They're like bigger than Hasbro's, so probably 5-inch.
Yeah. They looked about the size of the ECW figures, if you remember those.
And they had a blood variant for each one. I thought that was really cool.
The blood variant, yeah, that is great.
I collect a lot of different stuff.
You can see this. I tried to bring up a picture of one. If you remember this, that's the Abdullah figure. Yeah, if you ever saw those, they were very indie, but they made tons of them, and they were all guys that didn't exist. So I thought that was real neat. That they really made an attempt to put a bunch of different like old school guys out. So
yeah, they made an Eddie Gilbert, which is his only figure until we make one. That they made a few people that I was a big fan of, that I thought that's awesome that this small toy company could crank those out, and I would love to step in and do something like that one day. But I collect a little bit of everything. I collect some Hasbro's. I do have a small LJN collection. I mostly focus on my Mattels. Like I said, in the specific era that I'm into, I collect all kinds of expensive SH figure arts like Batman, DC Universe, that kind of stuff. Or Japanese import, Kinnikuman, like the little pink rubber muscle guys from the 80s. Those as big 8-inch figures or 6-inch figures, whatever they are. Just fun stuff that I think is still fun.
I always find it fascinating when the more expensive figures, like people customize those. I'm like, wow, you spent like a lot of money to buy that, and then you did something to it.
Yeah.
Oh, I've done that a few times. Like you buy the most expensive guy to rip it apart.
Yeah,
it sucks.
Yeah, did that with the Jack's Deluxe Aggression Ric Flair, which cost me about $100, and that's on the cheap side, just to try to make a giant Baba in the Mattel scale.
Oh, look at that though. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Ed, is there a way for you to show his website? If I know that Rob's setup does that more. If you can't, that's fine. I can show him a couple pictures on my phone. I can shoot you a link to it.
Yeah.
It's like the-warsman.online-web.shop.
Okay, I just shot you over a link in Facebook, if that helps. But he's got pictures of all the different heads that he's done, and they just go on the bottom. You keep scrolling, and he's got all these different heads, and it's really neat because for a collector out there who really wished there was a Bugsy McGraw figure or something like that, you go through his, and I'm sure you could find it. I don't know. Do you have Bugsy? But okay, well, I picked the wrong one.
The one pull you made, it was
sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, those are the kind of characters that I want to get to. It's just finding other like-minded collectors that also want a Bugsy McGraw figure. That's the difficult part because, like I said, it does cost money to get those made.
So this is what you meant by you changed the names, right?
Right.
Yeah, you got to kind of know who might be who.
So Bad Executioner right away. Who is that, Ed? We could even play a trivia game here. You don't know?
Is that Dusty Rhodes?
No, think Undertaker. He showed up for a short time.
Yeah, I don't know who that Nails. Is that Nails?
I guess it's Bam Bam Gordy, right? Because he was the executioner for the Undertaker for like a hot minute.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Bad for Bad Street.
There you go.
That's so funny. Who comes up with the names?
I do.
This is great. So what's that say? Banana Mike?
That would be Lance Russell, who I did make a bunch of Lance Russells for his family, his son Shane.
Okay.
And grandchildren out and wanted them.
That's great.
Lance Russell. So Lawler used to call him Banana Nose all the time, and he helped Mike around, so he became Banana Mike.
That's so funny.
So this is neat. So these are mostly the stuff that you've consigned to your partner who does the design, and then you put them out there afterwards. So these are originals.
Right. It's a good collaboration. I'm not telling anything. My partner lives in Croatia, and he's not a wrestling fan, or he's become more of a fan and more knowledgeable. But I don't think wrestling was on his radar before I found him and started working with him. So I find all the reference pictures and kind of make decisions on what expression to go with or what hairstyles, those kind of things, and work with him and get
That's Bald Fuji on the bottom. I'm sorry to interrupt, right? That's Bald Fuji. That is so awesome.
Who is Netflix founder?
That would be Butch Reed.
That's Butch Reed because of a Conrad joke.
Right? I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a Conrad joke, I think. So correct me if I'm wrong. Is there no Owen Hart figures after the Bone Crunchers or what have you? Maybe.
Correct.
So I'm going to guess though that you maybe took an earlier head and adapted it to the new Mattel, or no?
Yeah, I mean back in the day, but because
I'm looking at a picture of one here.
We sculpted that kind of looks like Owen Hart. Looks a lot.
Well, somebody wants to know: have you made any of the enhancement talent from the '80s?
Yeah, we've got Conquistadors.
There's the Owen Hart.
Ooh, okay.
I mean, it just your
Conquistador is cool. And you said Iron Mike Sharp, right? I made an Iron Mike Sharp before. I took a Freddie Blassie head and I painted his hair black, and I got just a generic body and put the brace on his arm. Oh, is that Johnny Rods?
SD Jones.
Oh, SD Jones. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
We have an Iron Mike Sharp coming. He's in this batch to be sculpted this month.
Cool. Big fan of his. He was.
How about Mario Mancini? Do you have any of him?
No. I'm from Northern Indiana, so I would probably want a Brian Costello.
Oh. Let me ask you this: Moondogs. Did you ever do a Moondog set? Yeah.
Made the Moondogs.
Oh, that's great. Great. I made a set too, and I got the pants from Ralph's.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of took some clay and I made the bone and the whole deal. And when you put it all together, it's pretty neat. I used the Hillbilly Jim head, but changed the eyes and did a couple of things. So
I did that back in the day too.
Yeah. I'm more basic than you.
Jim Powers and Paul Roma might be considered jobbers or enhancement talent.
There you go.
We've made them.
That's great. I heard an interview with Mario Mancini when he talked about how the figures got made, like how they decided who was going to get a figure, and he had a really good idea. I don't know if how true or whatever, but he said that he went to Vince and said, what about making a figure for me, and it came with a stretcher, which I'm like that would have been pretty cool. That way you have a jobber that you could has to leave the ring in a stretcher every time you use them.
He wanted that figure money payday.
Right, absolutely. I mean,
who wouldn't?
Yeah.
That might have been the conversation that Danny Davis had at some time to get a ref figure.
They do make a Danny Davis, and I'm working on a wrestler Danny Davis.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. He's going to want to see that because he's wanted to. I wrote his book too. And at the end of his book, he says that he shows a picture of the original ref figure that came out with the Legends. And he said, I just hope one day that they'll run out of like guys to do and they do my wrestling figure, you know.
Wait, has he never had one?
He's had the ref figure, but not the striped one. That's what he's just showing.
Oh,
And Danny really wants to see that one day. And he got all excited because recently Mattel called him and said, hey, we're doing a figure. And he's like, oh, this is awesome. And they're like, it's the ref figure again. And he's like, oh, you know, but he's super happy. He was happy to have it. They made it sort of like a Chase piece together figure of Danny Davis. You can get the head in one package and like the bust in another.
So I got black stripes on him still, but yeah, he's coming.
Nice. So I mean, if correct me if I'm wrong, the pants. Now, see, what I used to do is I would buy like the closest piece that I could to piece together, and I only did it with Jax. I never did it with like Mattel and stuff like that. Maybe I would have thought to do like a Terry Funk pants or something that were striped and maybe paint one of the other stripes. Try to keep it as complete as possible because I wasn't very good at painting. I was always afraid to paint. So I tried to do as little paint as possible.
Yeah, probably 6 different figures worth. Nothing's been painted on here. I pieced together an all white outfit based on Mattel parts that I just found. Nothing's been painted yet. So yeah, it's a big puzzle. Trying to find all the right parts.
Someone says we need a Mr. X figure.
That'd be cool too. A Mr. X figure.
A lot of masked head figures that could easily be turned into Mr. X.
Any Gorilla Monsoon heads?
Most toy companies have made one. Jax made a couple gorillas, and now Mattel has a Gorilla Monsoon.
Is there?
figure.
Okay. Yeah.
If there's like official releases, we try not to go that route.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Why waste your time, really? Right? Get the guys that don't exist. Yeah.
Do a pretty good job. If they release one that's a real stinker, we might retry it and see if we can come up with a better sculpt.
So is there a Barry Horowitz or Barry O? I'm thinking of some of the other jobbers like Ed said. Or is that just something you're starting to get into? To some of the really secondary guys?
We're cranking out between 25 and 30 heads a month.
Wow.
And each one takes a day or 2 or maybe even sometimes 3 to sculpt. So, we're trying to get some of the big wants first, like Dino Bravo or Butch Reed. But I'm trying to work in 1 or 2 like long shot with, never in a million years would ever get made. So that's kind of what I did with Uncle Elmer and the Conquistadors and Iron Mike Sharp and things like that. Or I just pay for it out of my own pocket and get them made that.
How about like a Haystacks Calhoun?
I'm all for it. We don't have.
I feel like that would be a good one.
Cool.
We have made Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher and
Original Chic?
Vern Gagne. Jax made an original Chic, and I did shrink it down to Mattel size. So I've got one of those, but he would be, maybe him and Sabu would be a great
2-pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone says Jake the Milkman from AWA.
Yeah. If you guys know Kevin Owens in the WWE, I'm convinced that Jake Milliman is Kevin Owens' dad. Same build, same look.
So how long does it take you from the time that you think of something that you want to do to the time that gets delivered?
If it's just delivering a head, the sculpt takes time. The print run that I have to do takes time. So I just tell people it could take anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. If it's something that's already on my website that I already have the file of, you're looking at closer to the 2-week side of it. But if it's something that, needs to be sculpted, we do a little back and forth and we make some tweaks and modifications based on feedback. That could take 3 or 4 weeks alone just on the sculpting part. And then a couple weeks to get it printed and shipped. And
so with me, I collected like everything. It was a bit of a completionist. And once I reached the end of the line, then I was like, geez, they don't have a Man Mountain Rock. and this is ridiculous that they don't have a Man Mountain Rock. So then I take a head from here, take the body from Bam Bam Bigelow, put it all together. And that was the only time I did anything 3D. Now I'm also a school teacher, so I contacted the AutoCAD class, showed them a picture, and they made the guitar. And I'll have to show it to you sometime, but they made the guitar. That really made the whole figure having that accessory. But I went online to see what other people did. And when I did so, this is when I learned that lots of people were doing this, and I didn't even really realize this. And you would go to like eBay, and they would have you type in custom action figure, and they would take a picture, and the figure would be like back here. And that would be right away to tell you that this was a bad figure because it wasn't up close. You didn't get a good look at Woodstock. You would see it from a distance. And typically, if you zoomed in, you would see that the paint was chunky, or it wasn't crisp. Like some of the skin would bleed over the eye, or it just didn't look real. It didn't look at all close. So that's why they would take it from a distance. So if you could give tips to somebody and tell them, you're going to be making these and you want to do a good job, and you want, and you want to be able to sell your custom figure on eBay up close where somebody can see it. What are they doing wrong painting? Is it the paint that they're using? Is it how they're painting? Or what do you do to get it good?
Could be.
I know some of it's skill. Go ahead.
Yeah. I first of all, I know the seller you're referring to.
It's in a ring, right? And it's it's like standing way back here.
Ring is made for like the Bendham figures. I think it's a
there
small.
You go.
I know the one you're talking about.
He's probably still selling them.
He is. He's still out there. I do recommend that you don't get Walmart paint. I shop at Walmart. Nothing against Walmart, but their craft paint isn't good. It's just not good for this kind of stuff.
What happens? Is that what makes it have that chunky look? Like there's a little piece of like, I don't know. It's not a bubble. It just looks like there's an extra wad of chunk of something of color in the paint.
All acrylic is water-based. I don't know if they have so much water. I mean, even when it dries, it's real
crispy.
Yeah.
Right.
And it takes off real easy. It doesn't adhere to the plastic very well, to where like hobby paints just kind of have more of a plasticky feel to it, and it sticks to other plastics better. So that is a big one right there. If you're working from a small bottle like this, little chunks of it don't form around the edge the way, the big bottles do. You'll get
the crust. Yeah.
Crust around there, the paint. So yeah, just being mindful of that.
Small brushes, big brushes.
You'll have to use both, but if you're doing fine detailing, yeah. Hobby Lobby has a great line of small brushes. I think it's called Master's Touch.
Okay.
So
little tiny bristles. They're almost nothing. It looks like.
Yeah.
Do you actually cut the bristles out sometime to get them even smaller?
I don't. But a lot of it is having the right material to work with. It is an investment to buy the kind of higher end brushes and paints and that kind of stuff, but the end result I think is worth it.
That's interesting. Yeah, as a collector, I always struggle with: do I want to buy something that's been repainted, even though it looks perfect, or would I rather have it be in not great condition because it's authentic?
So let me ask you this. Do you, what did you watch growing up? Because I look at some of your stuff and now I'm trying to get a little bit of wrestling history out of you, or the historian within you. Because there's definitely a historian within him to know the details of all of this stuff here. And I would imagine that some of the people watching right now who like to read the books might be interested in what your background is as far as a fan was concerned and what you watched early on.
Yeah, like a lot of people my age that didn't have a family member that was into wrestling. I'm 40. I'll be 46 next week. I found wrestling through the Rocky movie, like Rocky 2 or 3, whatever.
3, yeah. I think, right?
Yeah, Rocky 3. Yep.
Rocky 3. That kind of put it on my radar. Like, what the heck is that? Like, I didn't understand, like, they were kind of working together, but yet they were fighting. It wasn't boxing like I'd seen boxing before. I just never had seen it wrestling on TV. So seeing it through there, and then Hogan also appeared on the A Team, probably in late '84, early '85, and then the WrestleMania boom with MTV. I didn't have MTV back then, but my neighbor did because he had a satellite dish. So all of the early War to Settle the Score, MTV, WWF stuff got put in my life. Like, they were everywhere during that explosion. Friday night videos on NBC had wrestling personalities. MTV had wrestling personalities. Cyndi Lauper's videos had wrestling personalities, and then Saturday morning cartoons eventually had WWF wrestling personalities. So I was a WWF zombie. Like, I was a sponge for all that. And I think you might have heard me tell the story about my dad's aunt and uncle. So they were considerably older. Probably in '85, asked me if I wanted to go see wrestling, and I'm like, yeah, I want to go see wrestling. I want to go see the Junkyard Dog and Hulk Hogan, and I had my hopes so high that I was going to go see the WWF, but it was Dick the Bruiser's WWA in Fort Wayne that they ended up taking me to, and I remember being such a spoiled little shit. Like, who are these guys? I hate this. Who's Yukon Moose Cholak? Why has he got this big moose head on? I was so mad, but and I regret that because I'm sure I didn't come across as very appreciative. But I got to see Dick the Bruiser wrestle, and that's pretty cool to say. And I got to see Bobo Brazil wrestle, and that's pretty cool to say. And Yukon Moose, and I'm sure there were some other old time legends that were on there that I was lucky enough to see.
Did you ever try to hunt down the results to see what match you watched? Because I've done that.
Right. There's not a lot of great, at least not that I know of, resources for finding Dick the Bruiser's, fed results. But I would love to go back and see the show that I saw.
I don't know that you would see it, but I bet you could find the results and see and read the matches.
Yeah, that's what
the first live show that I saw was, and I believe it was Boston Square Gardens, but there were other cards like right near there. Boston Square Gardens? Is that what they were called?
Well, the Boston Gardens. Boston Garden.
Boston Garden. Yeah. I moved much later. I used to live out in Massachusetts area. But there was a couple of, like in Springfield, which is nearby. And then like in that surrounding area, there were a few other shows and they had almost identical cards. So as a kid, I'm not sure which one I saw, but I know the first main event match that I saw live was Greg the Hammer Valentine versus Chief Jay Strongbow.
Ooh, okay.
And the end of the match, Chief Jay went out in the audience, grabbed a ring of keys from a fan and started hitting Greg the Hammer. And Greg, now we know what he did, but he's all bloody, right? And I remember saying to my dad, I'm like, but he's the good guy. Why would he hit him with that? And then he got disqualified in the whole deal. And my dad tried to explain, well, only a few weeks ago, Greg the Hammer attacked Chief Jay Strongbow and put him out for a couple of weeks, and this is finally revenge. And that's when I understood the good guy versus bad guy. But to go back around again, they were very similar cards, but those archives are out there. There's a guy that I contact when I write books. His name's Jim Ruin, forgetting his last syllable of his name. But anyhow, he goes and finds me all kinds of results if I ask him whenever, and he drops me these timelines of matches. Super cool guy. And man, if you want, we could try to look it up. I'd love to see what those matches were. I could give him a buzz sometime and see if we could figure out what you were watching back then. It'd be neat.
Yeah, Fort Wayne. It was WWA.
Yeah.
The promotion. I would love to know that. But then I did get to start going to Notre Dame WWF. They started coming through kind of close to where I lived. Saw a lot of live events up there and TV tapings, and even a Saturday night's main event was up in Notre Dame.
Nice.
So
Do you remember the main event? Oh, Jim Ruerwine. Ruerwine. That's what it was. Sorry. Do you remember the main event of the Saturday night main event that you saw?
yeah, I'm trying to remember what the televised main event wasn't the real main event.
Yeah, because it would start with the main event, right? It would be the best match first.
I think the dark main event was Hogan and Ken Patera teaming up against what was advertised as Andre the Giant and Bobby Heenan, but a week or two before was when Ken Patera and Bobby Heenan did their debate, and Heenan hurt his neck, so he was subbed for Hercules. But Andre and Hercules against Hogan and Patera was the main event of the non-televised main event of the Saturday night's main event. But it was the Saturday night's main event where Jake the Snake fought Kamala, and the Honky Tonk Man was dressed up as Kimchi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's great.
And then Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, I think, fought Hercules.
Isn't it funny how we go back and we can remember that kind of stuff? You know what I mean? I mean, thinking way back, and it's left an impression this many years down the road. It's because of the storytelling and you know, the commentators as well as the wrestlers telling the story in the ring. If you think about that, that's really incredible, because I can't remember an episode of the Smurfs, or I can't remember, you know, a basic storyline of maybe, I don't know, He-Man or something. I know basically what He-Man was, but I don't remember that. But you can remember that, you know, Bobby Heenan had hurt his neck, and maybe soon after that he started wearing the neck brace, you know.
Yeah, that 1987 timeline is pretty firm in my mind. The TV taping was a couple months prior to WrestleMania 3, and then that Saturday night's main event was a couple months after WrestleMania 3. So I kind of remember everything leading up, but I got to see Kamala along with Kimchi come out and squash 3 or 4 enhancement talents at that TV taping, and it was great. I remember being legit kind of creeped out by the music and the presentation, and he was a big boy and he could move. Yeah,
a lot of people say too, you know, he was one of the ones that I did the book on, and fans told him for years that they suspected something might be, you know, not on the up and up. But when he came to the ring, people would run the other direction. I mean, you could see it. They didn't want to be anywhere near him because they thought he really was a monster, and who knows what he could do. And there's only a handful of those guys that had the real monster heat back then. He was definitely one of them.
Before he kind of became the comedy Kamala. In the early 90s, like in the 80s, you wanted to believe, right? You kind of let yourself go and suspend your disbelief, and the presentation was perfect, and he played the part perfectly, and it was so easy to be creeped out by him, or a heel Andre, when you see, you know, if you're 10 or 11 like I was, and he's a full 1.5 feet taller than everybody escorting him down the aisle. I remember being in awe.
Ed, who was your monster? Who was the guy you were afraid of as a kid if you watched it?
Well, I remember going to New Haven Coliseum with my dad to go get tickets. I was probably 7 years old, and Macho Man was outside, and I remember just running into my dad's car, like running back into the car because I was so afraid of him.
That's great.
Andre legit scared me. Like
the heel Andre?
Yeah, the heel Andre scared me. Eyes alone.
He must have been on the A card. Was he an A card guy? Because he never came to New Haven Coliseum. We never had Hogan either. We always had like Ultimate Warrior or Tito Santana and Greg Valentine.
It sounds like you might have got the B card, because Tito versus Greg happened everywhere. I wrote his book, and that was it still may be one of the longest feuds that ran with shows everywhere. And Tito wanted to give it away. He wanted to have Tito versus Valentine at WrestleMania 1. But when they put him in there with, who was it? Playboy Buddy Rose, I think, as the executioner, not the Bam Bam Gordy executioner that Ed had no clue I was talking about. But and they told him, no, we want to keep having that on the B shows because people are actually buying the tickets to see that as the main event. If we give it away at WrestleMania, they'll stop buying those tickets, and you have a hot thing going on here. So that's why they didn't do that at WrestleMania 1.
Interesting.
Yeah.
People with size to them always kind of scared me or creeped. Powers of Pain.
Oh yeah.
Super intimidating. I was never lucky enough to get super close to people until I was already, a senior in high school, and I'm a pretty big guy, so the novelty of the size thing kind of wore off. But,
well, it's definitely worn off now because the guys are like 5'8".
Yeah. I remember in the 90s going to a WCW Nitro. Many, I don't know why, but many of the luchadors were walking the halls together, and I just happened to be behind them, and they were about 2 feet shorter than I was. So that kind of registered with me how camera angles and, camera angles hide a lot. Let's just say that.
Yeah. So, any tips for the people out there if they're wanting to get started? I mean, are there tools that you have to have? There's something that someone told me was called like a Dremel or something like that.
A Dremel.
A Dremel. Yeah. What is that? What is a Dremel?
It's a rotary tool that, you can put different attachments on the head. It'll spin around. It could be a grinder. It can be an etcher. It could be a sander. It can do a lot of different stuff. But a Dremel or any kind of rotary tool, super helpful.
What do you do with it? How does it help you?
For me, like when I 3D print the heads, there will be little support nubs. I call them nubs, that like little support beams that attach to the print plate that I have to tear off, but it'll leave behind like a little nipple or a little nub. And I just use the rotary tool to sand those down real quick.
Cool.
Or if you need to hollow out a head or hollow out.
So basically, for the people that don't know, hollowing out the head. Oh, okay. Yep.
Hollowed out legs are short, so I could put a different leg in there.
The heads have like, I don't know how to explain it. Like two little balls with like a stick in the middle, and you would stick the ball into the body, and then the head into the other ball, and then that's what makes it so you can move it all around, right?
Okay.
So sometimes if they don't fit right, you would use the Dremel to get in there and make the peg fit better. I don't know what you would call the thing. But
yeah, I mean, there's different levels. It just depends what you're trying to do. If you're just doing a simple part swap and a repaint, you just need decent paints and brushes.
Mm-hmm. If
you're trying to sculpt different hair, then you're going to start looking at different epoxy putties, or, this green stuff, the yellow and blue putty that you mix together and you can sculpt with it. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Have you watched any of the toys that made us?
Yeah, all of them.
I thought the He-Man one was interesting when they said that they used old, like remaining heads that they had from another toy line for the He-Man figures.
Yeah, and Battle Cat was a Panther from the early 70s, like a G.I. Joe toy or something.
Oh, wow.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Do you know the story of the ref that came with the AWA ring that you could tell us about? I think they call him Nasty Ned, right?
Yeah, Remco, the company that made the AWA figures, made a line of kind of He-Man knockoff figures, but I think they were based on a DC Comics property called the Warlord.
Yeah, it was like a vampire looking.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
I called Demos.
Oh, he knows even more than I do.
That had and yeah, he kind of had a vampiric look about him with the eyes and the hair and the teeth. But they ended up using that same head for an AWA ref that they call Nasty Ned, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring a picture of him if I can. Let's see if I can get him up here.
Yeah,
there's Nasty Ned.
Oh yeah,
it was kind of rare, but if you look close at his head, it almost looks like he has fangs, right? Because it came from a different came from a different series, and they just wanted to add a referee to a ring set. So they took that head from some other thing, the Warlord series that he's talking about, and they just popped it on a ref body. So it was almost like they were customizing, right? This is like an early idea of a customization here.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
They would do
And
that.
what blew me away with that AWA line, not only did they have a nasty Ned, but they had a curly-haired, Curly Bill referee, and then a real Dick Worley sculpt. Like they had 3 referee figures in the mid 80s toy line. Today, it took Mattel 10 years to make a referee figure with the Danny Davis figure. It took 10 years to make a referee figure.
Wow.
I'm kind of I think I'm an action figure snob, but I don't think any line has ever touched the LJNs.
He loves the old school.
And it's not even the old school, but even back then, like when I was a kid, I remember I had all the Star Wars stuff. I didn't like how they had like separate pieces, and the LJN was the first one that was like a complete figure that, it just
didn't move though. It didn't move. There was no articulation.
Yeah, but just those breaking the line on like the limbs, I can't deal with it when it comes to like the Mattels or the Hasbros. It just looks weird.
I can see the charm in LJNs. They were my first wrestling figure.
Mine too.
The simplicity, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but the simplicity of them, I enjoy it. The sculpts were good. The likenesses were pretty good. The primary colors just popped. Like if you took care of them, they're awesome. If you beat them together, they.
Of course, yeah.
And that's what everybody did. They beat the hell out of them.
Yeah, and
we were talking about the Bundy one. The Bundy figure looks like a bowling ball. And if you recently, now I'm confusing myself here. We were talking about this. Was it last week? We were something. Ed and I were talking. And on Napoleon Dynamite, they took a random figure and he threw him out the back of the bus on a rope, and it was bouncing around and stuff. And I had heard that was an LJN. One person said it was a Bundy, and another person said it was an Andre the Giant. I'm not really sure which it was, but they couldn't get the likeness for the movie, and they used some generic thing. But yeah, those things were durable as hell.
I mean, the whole presentation of them, right, on that big bright blue card.
Yep.
I mean, it was an experience in itself, even walking down an aisle and seeing those on the shelf.
The commercials, the WWE today doesn't really work with Mattel to advertise their figures, but back then, Hulk and the Iron Sheik and Jimmy Snuka would be in commercials for them.
Right.
I think that really went a long way to help and sell that stuff. But what I was going to say is I had a very meager or modest LJN collection. I had 10 or less probably. But my best friend was an only child and spoiled as hell. He had almost every LJN they ever made and a couple rings, this and that. And I remember going over to his house, and one of his rings had a big hole in it, like he put his foot through it or something. What happened to your ring? And he's like, I was up on my bunk bed and I threw King Kong Bundy down into the ring.
He went right through it.
Bundy broke the ring. Yeah.
That's funny because that actually happened to me when I promoted a show. Bundy broke the ring. He was wrestling a guy named Primo Canera III, who went on to be Big Guido, I think his name was, in ECW. And we actually got some magazine coverage of this. It was something simple. It was like Bundy jumped off the second rope to drop his knee on the guy, do a knee drop, and the whole middle of the ring just went and it collapsed. Like it just went in like this, and they took pictures of it, and it was in PWI and stuff. It was pretty cool.
That's great.
So.
Cool.
Yeah, so just to rehash real quick, you were mentioning something about the wrestlers actually doing the commercials. Bruce Beefcake told a story that he was in some of those early commercials, and he had to go get his SAG card, for like acting, in order to be in the commercials. It was different than performing for the wrestling. You had to actually get a SAG card, Screen Actors Guild. And because he got that later on, he was able to collect insurance from the Screen Actors Guild when he had the parasailing accident where his face was collapsed in a parasailing accident. They had to reconstruct the whole deal, and he didn't have real legit insurance through WWF because they were independent contractors. So that Screen Actors Guild came into play and paid for a big portion of his medical expense. So through the commercial, he was actually able to help himself more so than he was through actual wrestling at the time. That's
amazing, because I remember the commercial he was in, and he was in it for maybe 2 seconds. All he did was rub his hands through his hair.
Yeah.
Greg Valentine was back there doing the elbow drop motion, and he just ran his fingers through his hair. No, that's amazing that helped him out like that.
John wants to know if you if you have a coffee table book of all the photos from start to finish.
That's not a bad idea, right?
Yeah, I don't. I'm just now getting into like Facebook living my process, showing people how I paint heads, or showing people how I'm piecing things together.
Getting a portfolio of all your stuff together would be interesting for people to see. It would be super cool to see each one of the different ones, because you spend hours on them. And there are different sites that actually bind the books together. So I'm a wedding DJ too sometimes. In the regular year, I'm an English teacher. And then during the summer, I'm a wedding DJ. And photographers will meet with the brides and stuff like that, and they'll set up shots, and then they send the shots out, and they can bind a book. They can make these custom books of pictures of all the different things of the weddings and all like that. $60, $70 or something to make a custom book like that. But yeah, it'd be pretty cool to do. But I think he should make a customizer's book. I think he's got enough. He could talk all about the whole. There is no custom book out there that I know of. And the people that you're watching right now, they're all under this banner, Wrestling Bookmarks. We're all about like uniting the wrestling book authors and creators and stuff like that. So if somebody wants to scoop him up and come up with a customized book, I don't think it exists.
I do want to know what would be the legalities of that, because I thought about doing like an LJN calendar, and then I was like, I wonder if I would get sued for that. I want to do like a photo shoot of like famous WrestleMania scenes using the LJN guys, and then I thought I'd probably get sued by somebody.
Yeah. Well, if he's putting up his 3D heads, that's original stuff, and a lot of it's painted. That's true. So a lot of that's his own at that point. So I'm not so sure, But even just describing the process and the stuff that he did, and maybe throwing in some backstories like he did with the AWA, or not AWA, the WWA with, as a kid and all, little things like that. It'd be interesting to read.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Warsman. Well, listen, thanks for joining us tonight.
Where can they find your stuff?
Yeah, where can we find your stuff?
The best place to go is just go on Facebook. I go by Warren Warsman Man, MANN. A lot of my early stuff is on there. If you're ever bored and you want to go through my pictures on there, you'll see my humble beginnings working on the Hasbros and everything up until now.
Cool. And what do the heads cost around? If somebody wanted to try to do this, if they wanted to get a head from you, what are they around? $20, $30, something like that?
If it's one that we're trying to get made, I try to get about 10 people to pitch in $15. So $15 can get you a brand new one. If it's one that's on the website, it's $21 plus shipping. But I do run sales and combine tag teams for a lower price, or the Freebirds are on there. People who look like the Freebirds are on there.
That's so great.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming today. We appreciate it. I hope some people learned something about the whole, the underground customizing thing. That was kind of the point to putting this together today. And I thought he told all kinds of neat stuff that I didn't know. You Ed?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see you later. Take care.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Hey, before we shut off, or did you shut off?
Yep. No, not yet.
Okay. So next week we got Mad Maxine, who was an old school women's wrestler from the 80s, and she's got a book coming out, and she's going to be on next week. So awesome. I thought I'd plug that. Her book's coming out very shortly, and my friend Pablo from UK said she was looking to do some interviews, and we scooped her up. So she's going to be talking about her book here next week. Mad Maxine. Cool beans.
All right, so this was excellent. Great.
You did like it. Tell us what you liked about it too, because I was really like, we were going to go with Chris Owens today. And he had something going on with the family where he couldn't do it. So I said, you know what, let's get a customizer guy. I think that would be something different to throw up here. What do you think? You have fun with this, Ed? Was that cool?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying not to fanboy too much, but yeah, I mean, I love all the figures. I think it's I wish I could do that stuff.
Yeah, me too. And I didn't want to look like a super nerd geek, but I was saying I was giving a little bit away, like that I knew more than I should know.
Right. So, all right. Well, yeah, next week, 8:30. It sounds like fun.
Sounds good. All right. Hope to see you guys then. Thank you.
All right.